Hi guys. Today we're starting solving systems with three variables. Now I've given you warning that this was coming. And so instead of just an X and a Y on this section, we're going to have an X, a Y, and a Z. I'm going to try to run through as many different scenarios as I can in these videos, and I'm going to separate them out according to which method we're using to solve these problems. When you're solving a three variable system, first of all, the amount of variables is going to determine how many equations you need to have. So if we think back to our very first chapter, we only had one letter. It was like the letter X. And we could write the letter X multiple times, but it was always just the one letter. And so we had one equation. Earlier in this chapter, we were solving two variable systems, and there were two equations. Okay, so now that we have three variables, there's going to be three equations. So the amount of variables that you're solving for will tell you how many equations that you have to have. Now, the methods that we were using for solving a two variable system are the same methods that we can use for three variables, with the exception of graphing. Graphing in three variables, you have to do it in three dimensions. You don't just have like your XY coordinate plane, you also have like that Z plane coming out. And so we're not going to be able to solve by graphing, but we will be able to use either substitution or elimination, same as we were doing with two variables. In this first video, we're going to start with a really, really basic substitution problem. And so here is my first example. Again, I have three variables. I have an X, a Y, and a Z, and I have three equations. That's mandatory. So starting with our most basic example, this problem, hopefully, maybe even pause the video, try it yourself. But looking at that very last equation, this problem is kind of nice because it's actually already given us one of the answers. In the very, very last equation, it says Z is equal to 2. So I already know one of my answers. Z is definitely the number 2. Since I have an equation that says Z equals, I will choose to use substitution in this problem. I'm going to start by substituting this 2 into an equation that only has two variables in it, the letter Z, and I don't care what the other letter is, as long as one of them is a Z. If I substitute it into an equation that has three variables in it, I'm still going to have two unknowns because I can only substitute for the letter Z. And so I really want to pick something that has the letter Z and only one other variable so that I can get that second variable. And so if I'm going to choose between the top one and the bottom one, I'm going to choose this bottom one. I'm going to replace the Z with the 2. And now I have only one letter, just the letter Y. So that's kind of the goal on these problems, is to get an equation down to just one letter so that you can solve for that one letter. So at this point in time, I will be solving for Y. And I get Y equals 8. So I've now found two of my three answers. I know that Z is 2. I know that Y is 8. So now the only letter that's missing is X. So next, I definitely have to choose an equation that has an X in it. And so now I will be choosing the top equation since it has a letter X, and that's the only thing that I'm not sure of at this point in time. And I will be substituting in both the Y and the Z. So we're going to substitute for both of these letters, leaving me with only a letter X. Everything else is going to turn into numbers, and the only letter I have left is the letter X. And now I can solve for X. Once you have all three of your letters and you have all of your answers, then you're going to write your final answer as an ordered triple. Now, as we've been talking about, the order does matter. It does have to be alphabetical order. If you put it in a different order, you're finding a different solution, and then that's considered to be incorrect. So make sure that it's an ordered triple, 3 numbers. And so the final answer to this question is -5, 8, and 2. So again, we started off with the most basic example that I could think of, one where we've already solved for one of the letters for you. On most of our other examples, it's going to take us a little while before we find our first answer. So we're going to have to do quite a few steps before we get to that, okay, now Z equals 2, and I plug it in here, and then I take those 2 and I plug them in over here. So this is actually usually around the halfway point in a problem. But I figured we'd start off a little bit simple. This concludes our first example and our first video.